What's cracking, everybody? This is the Chaos Dubs channel. I'm your host, Chaos, and today we're going to talk about Canada's silly gun laws, part 2. I know a lot of you liked this video, the first round I did it, and so here we are back for a second round of our ridiculous laws in Canada. Let's get started. Alright folks, so today we're going to talk about some silly gun laws here in Canada. I've got some stuff I want to show you here. So we're going to start talking about airsoft first of all today. So I've been into the airsoft for a long time, and I'm a bit of a collector. And I used to work at an airsoft shop for a year and a half or so at PM Hobby, and I ran the airsoft department. So I know a lot about this stuff, and it's a really strange kind of thing in Canada, I guess. So basically, airsoft guns are an unregisterable, unclassified, uncontrolled firearm. They are kind of on the border of being a prohibited replica firearm, but they're not, because they don't fit the definition of replica. But let me tell you a little bit more about this. So basically, an airsoft gun must damage your eye to be allowed into the country. That's the import laws, and it's a little bit ridiculous, but it has to mess your eye up 50% of the time. They use a pig eye actually as a test. And basically, so it's kind of ridiculous. Replicas are prohibited. Basically, it has to be under 5.7 joules of force at 500 foot per second on the top end. Now, that's where most people get things wrong. They think, oh, it's 500 FPS because of a pellet gun, but that's not the case actually. Airsoft guns are a little bit different because the weight of a BB is a lot less than that of a pellet. So basically, 5 joules of force is a whole lot of force too. Most airsoft guns are somewhere around 1 to 3 joules of force at 300 or 400 FPS. So FPS isn't really relevant. That's foot per second. Airsoft guns can shoot 600-700 plus no problem legally. That's not an issue as long as you're not using super heavy BBs and accelerating it that fast. But most airsoft guns will never be able to get it up to that fast. So BB weight changes the velocity and impact force. So the lighter BBs, they sting more, they go a little faster. Heavier BBs go a little slower, but they carry more impact weight behind them. So it's a little more like a paintball, or more like a oof rather than a bit of a sting. Now, airsoft guns only come into part of criminal code if it shoots below 366 foot per second. This is the stupidest part, if you ask me. Basically, if it doesn't damage your eye at all, you're not allowed to have it or bring it in the country. But again, because it doesn't really fall under the definition of a replica firearm, it doesn't really count. So I want to take you through here a little bit. Airsoft guns, they're not illegal or heavily restricted in Canada, nor will they be banned like Australia. Australia is really strict about that kind of stuff. Airsoft guns resembling with near precision an existing make and model of an arm other than an antique arm, and with a muzzle velocity below 350 or 366 foot per second are considered replica arms and therefore are prohibited devices. Now basically, folks, what that means is if it shoots below 366, as I was mentioning, you can't have it. It's prohibited. This is where it gets a little gray. Models resembling antique arms may be allowed. We're going to talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes here. Generally, antique arms are those manufactured before 1898. Now, that's not really relevant to airsoft guns here, but individuals may keep replica air guns they owned prior to December 1998. That's kind of a grandfather thing there. So, air guns other than replicas with a minimum muzzle velocity of 366 foot per second and a maximum muzzle velocity of 500 foot per second, or a maximum muzzle energy of 5.7 joules, which again, you're pretty much never going to reach out with an airsoft gun, are exempt from licensing, registration, and other requirements, and from penalties for possessing an arm without a valid license or registration, but are considered a firearm under the criminal code if used to commit a crime. So it's kind of silly. Antiques fall under this as well, but if you use them to commit a crime, then they're firearms. If you use a stick in your jacket like this and say, oh, it's a gun, you could be charged with a firearms offense, actually. So airsoft guns that exceed both maximum velocity and maximum energy, again, they'll never really do that. Then you need a PAL to own it. Not much more to say about that, really, folks. Importing guns, airsoft guns, is real hard. There are some spots that'll make your guns Canada legal, but we have a lot of great dealers here in Canada. where you can get your guns from. I didn't bring any airsoft dealers up there, but I mean, you could just search, you know, Canadian airsoft dealers if you're looking for some stuff, folks. And I mean, it might be a little more expensive than ordering from China, say, or Taiwan or whatever, but the risks are extremely reduced. When companies get shipments in, sometimes they'll get stopped at the border and they'll lose all their guns. It's on the company, it's not on you. So basically, we're going to talk a little bit more about air guns here. So specific types of firearms. We're going to talk about air guns and pellet guns. There's two general types of air guns, folks. So BB guns and pellet guns. Spring and airsoft guns, we're not really going to account because we've already talked about that, of course. So there's air and spring systems, basically. So air runs on CO2 or I guess green gas if you're talking about airsoft. But basically, pellet guns, folks, this is kind of strange if you ask me, because a lot of pellet guns, especially pistols, are metal and they shoot pretty hard with the CO2 and all that. You don't have to be 18 to buy them, so they can be bought and owned by anyone in Canada, although most stores will tend to go ahead and put a purchase age on them of 18, of course, simply because, I mean, it only makes sense, right? People probably shouldn't be having these if they're super young. So, but the pellet weight is what makes these a little bit different, right? So pellet guns are where people always say, oh, it's limited to 500 FPS. Well, that's because it is 495. That's because the weight of a pellet accelerated past that point reaches that 5.7 joules or whatever of muzzle energy. Now, when you're talking a real firearm with gunpowder, you're looking at, you know, hundreds or thousands of joules. I'm not sure if it goes up to thousands, but we're definitely talking about hundreds of joules of force. And now, some pellet guns that do shoot over 500 foot per second, they do require a PAL to purchase, and you do need your gun license, folks. So that's definitely something to consider. They are super quiet. We were out shooting them a couple weeks ago there, and they're pretty cool, actually. They're as close as you can get to a silenced gun in Canada. As far as BB guns go, they're never really going to attain a super high speed that pellet guns will, or other guns, or even airsoft guns. They're just not. They're not super tight on the tolerances, and I mean the BB kind of just floats in the barrel versus a pellet, which is lead and kind of expands to the barrel and uses the rifling in the barrel to get a little bit more stability in the air. So now I want to move on and talk about antique firearms. This is something really cool, I think, in Canada. I mean, it's really interesting. Basically, what it boils down to is antique firearms manufactured before 1898 that were not designed to discharge rimfire or centerfire ammunition, or has not been designed for such, or any firearm that has been prescribed to be an antique. So basically, there is antique firearms that shoot centerfire cartridges using black powder that are completely legal. Now, you don't need to have any kind of license to import them. You don't need to register them. There's no restrictions on buying or selling or any of that kind of stuff. So the types of antique firearms, basically, you know, there's the good old flintlock type of rifles. Now, we're not really talking about those as much, but those are definitely involved here. But anything manufactured before then that is not repeating and doesn't have a magazine, and that is not a shotgun, basically. So that includes, like I was saying, all kinds of flintlock, wheel lock, and matchlock type of rifles and pistols, as well as revolvers that shoot centerfire cartridges that use black powder. So as long as it doesn't fire any of these rounds right here, then it can be considered an antique. Now, depending on the rounds that it fires, do change what the laws are, basically. So basically, if you shoot 44 Russian, which is just fine in the antiques, no problem. You can shoot that all day. You don't even need a license for the ammunition, which is pretty strange. But if you put a 44 special round in there, and the difference is about this much on the brass casing on the bullet, then it becomes a prohibited firearm, or sorry, not a prohibited, a restricted firearm, in which you need licensing and you're not allowed to take anywhere but the range. But as soon as you're using 44 Russian, despite it looking, smelling, sounding, and working like a firearm, it's not a firearm, folks. Canada's pretty strange. So the really cool bonus about this is you can carry these with you camping, hunting. You can use them as bear defense. Now, to be fair, the rounds that we're talking about, 44 Russian, and these antique firearms, they're only shooting 750 to about 900 FPS, depending on the rounds that you load. It's definitely not, most likely not going to kill a bear, especially not in one shot. It might scare it. They are pretty loud, but it's probably not going to kill it. But I mean, if you have nothing else, it's good to have with you. You know, there's always this discussion on a lot of these hunting and gun owner forums of what you can and can't have with you while hunting, right? And this comes up a lot, so I find this really interesting, folks. So definitely something to consider for those of you that hunt and want something to keep on you while you're pooping and leaving your shotgun, you know, over by the tree. You can't carry your shotgun and wipe your ass, folks. It doesn't work, right? So there is a bit of a caveat to that. They're supposed to be open carried. As far as you ask me, it's probably not a good idea, simply because it's just attracting extra attention. I mean, you can get paperwork for them as well that says, hey, like some of them come with paperwork that say, hey, this is, you know, certified to be an antique and all this stuff. But most of them say right on them how old they are, and you can tell just by looking at them. Like, you know, they're pitted, they're worn, and they don't operate like standard normal firearms that come from our day and age. So you can fire these antique firearms anywhere, including the revolvers and derringers and all the kind of pistols, anywhere that non-restricted firearms can be fired, except for indoor ranges, because they use corrosive black powder. Now you can get the smokeless powder. I don't think that makes it any less corrosive, but maybe you're allowed to use it indoor. I'm not really sure. I'm not too familiar with that. What else can I say about this here? So, of course, these can also be considered a firearm if used in the commission of a crime. The same with airsoft, the same with anything else. Ammo for them is really hard to find, folks. Generally, you have to make your own ammunition. 44 Russian can still be bought, but it's about $2 a round. You can make your own for about half of that, approximately. 2/3 of that, maybe, so save some money there. Oh yes, that's what I was going to mention, folks. You can buy a modern revolver for, you know, $300 to $600. Like, it's really not that much. Even a Glock is like $700 or $800, and that's, you know, that's not a whole lot of money. But when you're talking about these antiques, because they are so old, I mean, you got to think about it. If it's from 1898 or 1894, that's been through both World Wars. That has probably shot and killed people in both World War I and World War II, folks, and maybe in between there as well. These hold a lot of antique value, as well as the fact that you don't need licensing and stuff for them, so they are really, really expensive. For a decent piece in like our right shape, you're starting looking at about $3,000 and up. Some of them go for $25,000, depending on the quality, depending on the rarity, depending exactly what you're looking for. But a decent firearm that would likely be fireable will be around $3,000. Now, that's the thing. Not all of them are fireable. You should definitely get a gunsmith to check it over before you do start putting ammo in it. Of course, muzzle loaders. That's they're definitely antiques. This is where it gets a little interesting. This is kind of what we're talking about here regarding the pistols. Firearm that discharges black powder cartridges might be considered an antique if it was made before 1898, but not necessarily. It would depend on the caliber or gauge. Now, this is where it gets into the 44 Russian versus 44 Special. And there's a whole bunch of other different calibers. I'm just talking about this one because it's an easy comparison. And everybody knows what a 44 Magnum is. Now, these are way smaller than a 44 Magnum and about 1/5 of the breech pressure. Chamber pressure. So if you put a 44 Magnum in one of these guns, they would probably just explode, honestly. So what else can we say here? For example, so it would depend on the caliber gauge. For example, so a shotgun that discharges 12 gauge center fire cartridges would not be considered an antique, no matter how old it is, simply because that just doesn't count. Obtaining ammunition for black powder firearms. You must have a firearms license to obtain ammunition as defined in the criminal code. Ammunition means a cartridge containing a projectile designed to be discharged from a firearm, and without restricting the generality of the foregoing, includes a caseless cartridge and a shot shell. The definition does not include loose black powder and shot used in muzzleloaders. Black powder is regulated primarily under the Explosive Acts, which is administered by Natural Resources Canada. For more information on the requirements of purchasing loose black powder, contact Natural Resources. A little thing about that, you don't need a license when you buy black powder, brass, primers, or bullets. So you can make your own ammo right from scratch, folks. Now, this is saying that you must have a firearms license to obtain ammunition. From my understanding, folks, you do not need a firearms license because it is not a firearm. You see, because this says here, containing a projectile designed to be discharged from a firearm, right? So these are not firearms. Because they're not classified as a firearm in the criminal code or in law, they don't count, folks. We did talk a little bit about pellet guns. I just wanted to kind of go through a couple pictures. You can just get all these different BB pistols here. I kind of backtracked on that a little bit, but you can get all these different BB pistols here. And look, they're pretty cheap. 150 bucks, 200 bucks, 120 bucks. And these resemble real firearms. Like there's your Beretta, there's your 1911s, there's your Glocks, right? And they look pretty dang real. You get the Makarovs. What else you got? Some revolvers. You know, these are pretty legit looking guns, folks. I mean, you can just go ahead and buy those, and you don't even need to be 18. Here's a few more examples. These are 177 cal. Look, this one uses actual shells. How cool is that, folks? 120 bucks for that guy. So this is going back to where we were about antiques here. I just wanted to show you an example of an antique revolver here. This is what it looks like, and I mean, to those of you that may not know firearms real well, it may just look like any other revolver, but to those of you who know Old West stuff, you can tell there's, you know, it's the Old West style guns. They don't really look like modern revolvers. They do operate generally the same way, but you know, they're antiques, folks. Here's a better example. So this is shooting 455, which is, it's a 45 cal. It's a big old 45 cal. This gun's from 1878, double action. So what that means is you can either pull the trigger and it'll be a super long, hard trigger pull for the hammer to fly back and then forward, or you can cock the hammer and then fire, being single action. There's some flare pistols, just a couple examples here. Let's see what else we got from here. We'll go view all products. Now this is just antiquegunscanada.com, so you don't need a license, you don't need any kind of registration, and see, you can fire, or you can get unfired 44 Russian brass, you can get rimfire ammunition, which probably isn't any good anymore because it's so old. Rimfire reloadable cases, those are for the rare rimfires. So we got 45 ACP, that's 3,200 bucks, just as an example. 3,100 bucks for a 44 Russian, that's pretty cool. Although this is it's a little weird if you ask me, because that one there, this one breaks in half, you see. So like it opens up like that, and I believe that's how you put more shells in it, which I think is a little bit weird. I'm not sure what that one's shooting, but again, just kind of some examples. And here's another example. You can see a whole bunch of different revolvers and derringers, and I mean, look at this pepper box, guys. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shots. How cool is that? And you got your flintlocks, some other revolvers, and I just want to show you a few of the rifle examples here that you can get. 1,500 bucks, pretty cool. It's, you know, flintlock ball and cap style rifles. It says this is an antique. It's not, obviously. It's just deactivated. Pretty cool. I'm sure it was $5 grand or something though. This is deactivated as well. That's why it's not cap and ball, because it is magazine fed there. Okay, so moving on, folks, I just want to drive this point home. If criminals want untraceable guns, they're going to be able to get them. I know it seems a little ridiculous that they would use the flintlock, but they're not going to. They're going to go pick up a revolver for $3,000 to $5,000, and they're going to get the ammo for it. They don't even have serial numbers. These guns are so old, folks. Again, they've been through World War I, World War II, on and on. The last thing I want to talk about before we finish this video off, because it's getting pretty long here, 20 minutes already, I've been going on and on, basically is AR-15 versus LAR-15. And this kind of touches on the last video where you can use a pistol caliber carbine and get more rounds than you're supposed to have for a rifle. So we're just going to talk about the AR-15 here for a minute. It's a big scary gun that was just made prohibited in Canada for no freaking reason at all. We're looking at these, you know, pretty straightforward, pretty standard, but that's a rifle. Now, if you take a look at the LAR-15, it's a pistol. So it's kind of silly, but it's a it's a rifle caliber pistol rather than a pistol caliber rifle. But because of this, when it's in pistol form, you can get 10-round pistol magazines, which I think is ridiculous because this is not a pistol, folks. That's a rifle with no buttstock on it. But so right before all this stuff was banned, you can get these 10-round magazines, which you are not allowed to have more than 5 rounds, as we discussed in the previous video, for a rifle, for a centerfire rifle. But as you can see here, because you're not modifying the magazine, you can just pop this in, and all of a sudden, boom, you have 10 rounds. Now, if you look at this photo here, these are mag doublers, or these are the extensions, sorry. Okay, I'm going to search up this doubler here. Oh, is that it there? No, I'm just going to search it up here for you quick. Anyway, well, I'm just going to explain to you. Basically, it looks like these, except it attaches 2 of these 10-round mags together from the center. So there's like a little, like, you know, rubber thing in the middle, and you put 2 of them together. So, like, to reload, now you got 10, click, 20 rounds. Like, it's real quick to reload when you have it attached to your gun like that. It's 2 seconds, folks. But before we make this video any longer, I just wanted to say thank you all for tuning in. And I'm Chaos Stubbs. We're going to do, I got another video at least about some of Canada's silly laws. And if you know any of Canada's silly laws, do for sure spit down in the comments. Let me know what you think there. I'm going to leave a link for Canada's silly laws, gun laws part 1 in the bottom of the description of the video there. And yeah, thank you all for tuning in. And catch you next time, folks.